Wow. So I just finished Andor Season 2 and it was fantastic. Heavy, but fantastic. The show deals with the toughest and most human themes of any Star Wars show or film ever. And it's smart, very smart. But it's all almost undermined by one very dumb choice. Okay, so here's my list of the 5 smartest things I love about Andor and the one dumb one that almost ruins it all. Welcome to Philosophy All Along. I'm a professional philosopher, and I love to use the tools of philosophy to help me understand things on a deeper level. And there's a lot that's deep about this show. Okay, spoilers ahead. Number 1, the parallels between the Empire and the Rebellion are really smartly done. So Screen Crush points this out, by the way. Check out their channel. They're fantastic. They do amazing deep dives into shows like Andor. Now, they pointed out the red tape, the bureaucracy is similar between the Empire and the Rebellion. For example, Dedra wants to get things done, but she's always having to go through the right channels and it slows her down. Andor deals with the same problem, so he's just going to ship off whenever he feels the need, and he's getting in more and more trouble to do that. Another similarity between them, we see multiple characters take murdery actions on both sides during the show. Not only do we see the atrocities the Empire is willing to commit to accomplish its ends, we see members of the Rebellion do the same. And these kinds of connections are great because Lucas wanted to show similarities between the Empire and the Rebellion. That's why in A New Hope, when Han and Luke get their medals, the Rebellion troops are arranged like Nazis at a rally. My favorite parallel between the two is the Empire's manipulation of the media at Gorman. They spin the story of what actually happens there to justify destroying the planet for fuel. But we also see the Rebellion do a similar thing when they spin the story of how Mon Mothma escaped. The truth that Andor snuck her out kind of behind the back isn't inspiring enough. So leadership says they're going to give someone else the glory for helping her. Okay, speaking of parallels, number 2, the last episode and the parallels between Kleya and Dedra are brilliant. Both characters take similar actions in morally gray spaces throughout the show. But here at the end, we see multiple shots with them framed similarly, helpless and hopeless, isolated images where they appear kind of trapped and alone. And in so many ways, they're the same person, orphaned and raised to be what they are, seeking meaning through extremity, and they both bear the fruits of their labor. Dedra sacrifices so much to give power to the Empire, to help empower it to be a machine that can do anything it wants to anyone, and it does exactly that to her, imprisoning her, likely without a trial. And Kleya toils to create a rebellion that seeks freedom from the Empire, and although she's not received as a hero, and in some ways is similarly imprisoned, her prison is wide open space in nature, in chaotic nature, a representation of the wildness that freedom entails. Okay, number 3, the connection between B2 and K-2SO. There's a lot of psychology in this show, which makes sense. It's a spy thriller. They dig deep into the minds and the past that create the characters. One classical psychological concept is the Freudian idea that we don't ever leave our childhood behind. We're like cats who continue to exhibit the behaviors that once had meaning when they were kittens, like kneading. But now it's just a vestige, a purposeless reminder of our childhood, and not just our traumas, but also those things that brought us reassurance, like movies that we loved as kids and toys that we loved. We want to see them brought back in some big and grand way. Well, I think that K-2SO is made by this show to be a kind of adult recreation of B2. In other words, they took the character from the film and gave him even more depth and meaning by adding B2, the droid that Cassian grows up with. Why was Cassian compelled to try and get K2 reprogrammed in the first place, knowing how dangerous he is? Sure, that danger is most definitely a reason why, so that it can be used against the Empire. What even gave him the idea? What made him even feel the desire, I think, is inspired by the droid he grew up with as a child. Notice B2 is also very childlike, a reminder of the innocence of childhood. And as an adult, Cassian's droid companion takes on a far more violent and cynical persona, reflective of how the innocence and joy of childhood gets turned into cynicism and pain as we make the compromises demanded by growing up. Okay, almost done with brilliant things before we get to the show-killing dumb thing. All right, number 4, meaningless deaths intertwined with meaningful lives. Syril's death does nothing. In the end, it motivates no one and changes nothing. The show doesn't hesitate to provide us with examples of how we might try to make world-changing choices like Syril's that end in nothing other than our suffering and meaningless deaths. And this is juxtaposed with so many meaningful lives that are almost accidentally meaningful, where one tiny choice leads to an entire rebellion. Things never go according to plan. Trying to find your sister can lead to you helping take down the entire galactic empire. This mimics real historical events, where one small choice by a spy or even just a random person results in massive consequences. Like the defection of Soviet officer Stanislav Petrov, who chose not to report a false missile alarm and prevented a nuclear war as a result. But in Syril's case, the choices he made to try to bring a murderer to justice lead to nothing of significance, just his own small death. Okay, the last brilliant thing is a contentious one. The connection to our own world. Look at the parallels between what we are dealing with right now in our politics and the show. The arrest of people without trial in the show parallels things that are happening here in the United States. And just the general willingness to get into the grittiness of reality, right? The fact that they use the R word proves the show wants to be grounded in our actual experience and give voice to the horrible things that happen to people, not just in romanticized ways, but on the ground with real cost. Here in the US, the president is trying to find ways, at least he said, to suspend habeas corpus, the right to a trial. And there we see it again in Andor. Is the show taking a political side? Probably not. Given that it shows us both the evils of a controlling, xenophobic, and genocidal government and the dark deeds of an alliance fighting for liberal freedoms. Good TV often takes its cues from the real world, and it makes us feel grounded and connected to the show. We understand it. We see ourselves in it. And Andor gives us good reason to worry about where we are right now. Finally, this brings us to the thing that I think might undermine the entire show. Andor's child. So Tony Gilroy, the showrunner, said that they did it because it was too sad to end knowing that Andor was basically flying off, fated to die. So they ended with this happier note. And as cute as that baby is kicking the tall grasses, this choice just kind of keeps up the old trope of needing men to have sons to justify the ending and death. I see people already on socials referring to the child as a son, despite the fact that there's absolutely no evidence of whatever the baby's gender might be. And I think it's because we somehow feel better knowing that a man has sown his seed before his death and that he has a son to pass on his name. You know, that's why we call kids like Junior and so the second. It's an attempt, I think, to make the show feel a little bit more Star Wars-y, to make it feel a bit more like A New Hope. I mean, they even end with a similar visual that we see in A New Hope, right? Kind of looking off into the sun. But I think it also makes Andor's episode feel, and the show as a whole, feel a bit cliche. The reality is, in the world that the show created, if we're being consistent and following the show's logic, it's one in which Bix is now stuck raising a child during wartime alone after having abandoned the father who will never know the child ever existed. And the child grows up never knowing what good old dad did to try and save the galaxy. The kid probably ends up dead in a Tatooine gutter somewhere after a 5-day bender, owing 10,000 credits to the Hutts. Well, at least if we follow the themes and motifs of the show. Frankly, Andor never felt very Star Wars-y to me in terms of the Star Wars I grew up with in my youth. And that's great. That's okay. It's jaded and real. It's grown up with me. It exposes how awful we really can be. I love it. It shows us what happens when Star Wars grows up and the real cost behind our fantasies and our dreams. But to try to make us feel better by giving Andor some random kid is just a bit insulting to the spirit of the series. And it appeals to some weird need we have to see that the cost of war for men mitigated by having ill-fated soldiers off on their way to die impregnate women who are now stuck raising children during wartime. And they've got, at least another 10 years before the Empire officially collapses? The show's better than that. I don't think Andor is best understood as a father. I think he's a mother. He gives birth to the rebellion, and through that to the new republic. He labors and toils and sacrifices, and in the same vein of good feminist literature, he gives birth with the help of a tribe, numerous others who share that burden to bring about a better world, a world that he never sees because he dies in labor. But this random kid, well, Bix, who was sexually assaulted earlier in the series, is now just being used as a breeding trope to pacify our need to see Andor continue. She deserves better than being used by the show writers as an incubator for Andor's immortalization. Personally, I like to believe that the child that we see isn't Andor's kid or son or whatever, because this means that she's living the life that Andor sacrifices himself for. Happy, maybe with some nice partner who helps her milk moofs on their little farm in a happy corner of the galaxy. A world that she and Andor both sacrifice so much for. Well, with that, thank you so much for watching. If you like this episode, please like and subscribe, ring that bell for alerts. It helps me a lot to try and grow the channel. If you disagree, pop it in the comments. I love to talk with you all. And if you do like it or something good about it, please put it in the comments. It's always good to hear. I put out at least one fun video a week, and I also do a lot of political analysis, which is a lot more depressing. Well, maybe as depressing as Andor, but it's important. So please do check out my playlists on my channel. Follow me on Blue Sky and wherever you get your podcasts at Philosophy All Along. And of course, may the Force be with you, always.